Ang alas 4 ng hapon, Radyo ESKWELA sa DXND, Radyo Bida.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Masa'ul khair ya atfal. Welcome sa ating programang Radyo ESKWELA. Hatid po sa atin ng With Love John Foundation Incorporated sa pakikipagtulungan po ng Department of Education, Kidapawan City Division. Ang radio-based instruction ang siyang nakikitang mabisang paraan upang maipagpatuloy ang edukasyon sa gitna po ng pandemya. Handang isip, handa bukas. Ako po si Marlon Bulasa.
Sa ato mga suking tigpaminaw, loko probinsya sa North Cotabato, welcome og dayon usab kamo dinhi sa atong programa ang Radyo ESKWELA, ang radio-based instruction hatod kanato sa Department of Education, Kidapawan City Division. Of course, kanunay natong kauban ang suporta sa atong RBI coordinator, Ma'am Shirley Dua, also our LR supervisor, Ma'am Hazel Aparez. Good afternoon and welcome kini si Crisalda yan Sampani Binyes.
Good afternoon, usa ka maayong hapon kanatong tanan magahigala sa tuang mga suking tagapaminaw this afternoon sa mga ginikanan sa tuang sponsor with Love John Foundation Incorporated headed by Dr. Bernie Miguel o ang atuang administrator si Sir Ian Leo Domingo. Maayong hapon, usab ang atuang pagtamyaw sa tuang mga kaubanan sa Department of Education, Kidapawan City Division sa tuang CID Chief Dr. Milrose Peralta, SGOD Chief Sir Mejio Orias, LR Supervisor Ma'am Hazel Aparece, and RBI Coordinator Ma'am Shirley Dua. Maayong hapon, kini si Gladys Mir Pontongan.
O kanunay natong pagtamyaw sa tanang tigpaminaw sa District 1 o District 3 sa probinsya sa North Cotabato, pinagi sa DXMS Radyo Bida, Cotabato City. Mapya malulam sa langon.
And kitag hapon, madunggan, matanawan, pinagi sa itong Facebook Live. Check ninyo ang DX and the Radyo Bida Kidapawan City and DepEd Tayo Kidapawan and Happy FM Facebook page.
Yes, mapyan sa ato ang mga kaigsuunang mga IPs. And syempre, pwede po ninyo balik-balikan ang tanang mga episode sa Radyo ESKWELA, pinaagi sa pag-login sa site sa ndbcnews.com ug pangitaa lang ang DepEd Learning Channel.
Alhamdulillah, another great learnings para sa atong science grade 5 o grade 6 parehong week 5
Wow.
sa atong quarter 2.
So I'm sure karon pa lang daan nangandam na ang ato ang mga grade 5 o grade 6 sa ilang mga modules kay para hapsay og hanay ang ilahang pagtulunan karong hapuna.
And I believe they are very excited no sa mga pagtulunan living and non-living things atong sayro na karon no kung
Sige.
unsa ba kana atong mga feeling kay do na man gyud tay feelings ibig sabihin mga living things gid ita. All right, so I guess andam na ang atong grade 5 and grade 6.
Yes, tawagon na nato daan ang mga grade 5 learners kay I'm sure ang grade 6 nag-andam na po na sila. Apan ang pangutana mga grade 5 learners adto na mo sa lugar kung asa mo komportable kauban ang inyuhang mga ginikanan kay ang pangutana. Grade 5 learners, andam na ba mo?
Andam na!
Radyo ESKWELA.
Hello, kids! Welcome to the living world. What a wonderful sight we see in the living world and interact the plants around us. Can you give examples of different types of plants you see in your surroundings? Did you wonder how plants continue to exist on Earth? What do they have to continue their own species? Get ready as you discover how plants reproduce. In your last module, you have learned the reproductive parts and functions of the flower. Can you still remember? Let's check it. Unscramble the letter to reveal the words. Number 1. It is the female part of a flower. Pistil, correct. Number 2. The most obvious part of a flower. They are brightly colored to attract insects for pollination. Petals, right. Number 3. The male part of the flower. Stamen. Accurate. Number 4. Modified leaves which enclose and protect the other parts of the flower when it is still a bud. Sepals. Correct. And number 5. Enlarged upper end of a flower stalk which bears the flower or group of flowers. Receptacle. Very good. Today, we will discuss and discover how plants reproduce. Are you ready to listen to our new lesson? Our objective for today is to describe the different modes of reproduction in flowering and non-flowering plants such as moss, fern, mongo, and others. Are you ready?
Hello kids! This is your radio teacher, Teacher Steven Pahang from DepEd Kidapawan City Division. You can see different plants everywhere. They grow or multiply in number of their own kind, and that is called reproduction. Plants carry out reproduction in different ways, such as from seeds, spores, or other plant parts. They may reproduce either sexually or asexually. Sexual reproduction in plants makes use of flowers. It involves the union of the egg cell and the sperm cell. Pollination is the first step in the process of sexual reproduction in flowering plants. It occurs when pollen grain are transferred from the anther of one flower to the stigma of the same flower or another flower of the same kind. There are two kinds of pollination: the self-pollination and cross-pollination. Self-pollination occurs when pollen grains transfer from the anther to the stigma of a flower of the same flower or of another flower on the same plant. Cross-pollination occurs when pollen grains transfer from the anther to the stigma of a flower of another plant. What happens after pollination? When a pollen grain lands on the stigma, it becomes swollen because it absorbs water and sugar from the stigma. Then, it grows and forms a pollen tube which extends down the style and then later extends down to the ovary. The sperm cell from the pollen grain travels down the pollen tube. The sperm unites with an egg and form a zygote, a fertilized egg. The process wherein a sperm cell unites with an egg cell is called fertilization. After fertilization, the ovules harden and become seeds. Each seed contains an embryo, a seed or bud that contains the earliest form of a plant's roots, stem, and leaves. The sepals and the petals of the flower start to wither and fall off. The ovary that surrounds the ovule enlarges and grows into a fruit. The fruit protects and helps in disseminating the seeds. The seeds are then well packed for dissemination to continue the life cycle of the species. Pollination is usually brought about by wind, insects, or birds. Animals and other agents that aid in sexual reproduction of plants are called agents of pollination. Example of a plant that reproduces sexually through seeds is the mongo plant. Seeds may not grow for a few days, months, or even years. When conditions occur, they awaken and sprout into a new plant. This is known as germination. Germination begins when the seed absorbs water and swells. The seed coat cracks. The root tip appears and becomes elongated. Out of the cotyledons, 1 or 2 seed leaves emerge. The terminal bud and the first leaf appear. Seeds do not germinate at the same time. Some sprout after a few days. Others may take a longer period to germinate. Seeds germinate best under favorable conditions. Asexual reproduction is a method of reproducing new plants from one parent. It is called asexual reproduction because no union of sex cells takes place. In several advantages, it can be used to grow identical plants faster and more successful than a method that relies on seed germination. Asexual reproduction is also called vegetative propagation. The methods in producing new plants using the asexual reproduction are the natural vegetative reproduction and artificial vegetative propagation. In natural vegetative reproduction, the plants reproduce from their own parts, such as stems, underground stems, leaves, and roots. While artificial vegetative propagation, grafting is the most widely used artificial method of propagating plants. Marketing or air layering is the most popular method of propagation, and budding is an artificial method of asexual or vegetative propagation where a bud from one plant may be attached to another plant. How do ferns and mosses reproduce? Ferns are among the most primitive plant types. Ferns have surprisingly sophisticated reproductive adaptations. Like many other plants, ferns can reproduce by sexual or asexual methods. They reproduce sexually through the spread of the spores. On the underside of some fronds or leaves, there are small rows, dots called sori. When they dry and break open, huge numbers of tiny, dust-like spores are released. If a spore lands in a suitable spot and germinates, it will grow into a heart-shaped plant. These tiny plants, which generally remain unnoticed, represents the gametophyte generation, responsible for producing both male and female gametes, the sperm and eggs. Once united, these gametes form the zygote and eventually the familiar fern. On the other hand, they can also reproduce asexually in their rhizome or underground stem, grows just beneath the surface of the soil. From its upper surface, the rhizome bears large leaves called fronds. How do mosses reproduce? Mosses spread in multiple ways, but unlike flowering plants, they depend on moisture to sexually reproduce. Mosses reproduce by spores, which are analogous to the flowering plant seed. However, moss spores are single-celled and more primitive than the seed. Spores are housed in the brown capsule that sits on the seta. As the spores ripen, they are dispersed from the capsule, and some land in areas where there is enough moisture for them to grow. The young moss looks like a very thin, tangled mass of branching green hairs. Buds will appear next to the green hairs, from which tiny stalks and slim leaves will grow. Some mosses have cups on their tops that produce sperm. They are male plants. The female counterpart has eggs between her overlapping leaves. Water is a necessity for fertilization. As the sperm become mature, they have to swim to the eggs to fertilize them. The fertilized egg then produces the stalked brown capsule. Mosses also spread asexually by sending out new shoots in the spring from the last 14 years plants, as well as fragmentation. Pieces of the moss body can break off, move by wind or water, and start a new plant if moisture permits. Both mosses and ferns are a group of plants that employ both modes of reproduction. They have a life cycle that alternates sexual and asexual reproduction, a sexual gamete producing stage, and a sexual spore producing stage. These are called alternation of generation. I hope you've informed a lot. This is your radio teacher, Teacher Stephen Pahang from DepEd Kidapawan City Division, giving you the lesson written by Ma'am Elmarie Atabelo Villas Rubio from DepEd Kidapawan City Division.
You have just learned that plants reproduce sexually and asexually. Others employ both modes of reproduction. Do not forget to water your plants to help them reproduce. Let's have a recap. What is the difference between sexual and asexual reproduction? Correct. Sexual reproduction in plants makes use of flowers. It involves the union of egg cell and the sperm cell. While asexual reproduction is a method of reproducing new plants from one parent. There is no union of sex cells takes place. What are the similarities of sexual and asexual reproduction? Accurate. The similarities of sexual and asexual reproduction, they are both plants need pollen to fertilize the seed. How mongo plants reproduce? Correct. Mongo plant reproduce sexually. How do ferns and mosses reproduce? Yes, ferns and mosses reproduce by sexual or asexual methods. Now that we're done, we will move to the assessment part of our module. Listen carefully and choose the letter of the correct answer. Number 1. It is the process where the male sperm cell joins with a female egg cell. Letter A, self-pollination. Letter B, cross-pollination. Letter C, fertilization. And letter D, germination. Correct. The answer is letter C, fertilization. Number 2. What happens during cross-pollination? Letter A. The pollen grains transfer from the anther to stigma of the same flower. Letter B. The pollen grains transfer from the anther to the stigma of the flower that belongs to another plant but of the same kind. Letter C. The pollen grains transfer from the anther to the stigma of another plant of a different kind. And letter D. None of the above. Precise. The answer is letter B. The pollen grains transfer from the anther to the stigma of a flower that belongs to another plant but of the same kind. Number 3. Which is true about asexual reproduction? Letter A. Only plants can use asexual reproduction. Letter B. All organisms use asexual reproduction. Letter C. There is only one parent involved in asexual reproduction. And letter D. There are at least 2 parents involved in asexual reproduction. Great! The answer is letter C. There is only one parent involved in asexual reproduction. Number 4. It is a method of growing new plants where there is no union of sex cells. Letter A. Asexual. Letter B. Sexual. Letter C. Self-pollination. And letter D. Fertilization. Awesome! The answer is letter A, asexual. Number 5. It is the process of reproduction in plants where the male and female parts of the flower are involved. Letter A, asexual. Letter B, budding. Letter C, pollination. And letter D, sexual. Amazing! The answer is letter C, pollination.
Like a small boat on the ocean, sending big waves into motion. Like how a single word can make a heart open. I might only have one match, but I can make an explosion. And all those things I didn't say were wrecking balls inside my brain.
We have just finished our quiz for today. Make sure that you have written the letter of your correct answer on your module. If you have clarification with our lesson, you can contact your advisor through your group chats or cell phone messages. Do not forget to answer the additional activities on the last part of your module. We're done of our lesson on how plants reproduce. Make sure to follow our school on the air. This is your host, Teacher Gladys Mir Pontongan from Kidapawan City Division. Keep safe, everyone!
No, I've still got a lot of fire left in me.
Radyo ESKWELA. Makinig sa programa Sulong DepEd Kidapawan. Programang maghahatid ng mga kaganapan sa loob ng DepEd Kidapawan City Division. Sulong DepEd Kidapawan. Tuwing linggo, alas 10 hanggang alas 11 ng umaga sa himpilang DXND. Radyo Bida, Sulong DepEd Kidapawan.
Inihahatid sa inyo ng With Love John Foundation Incorporated sa ilalim ng pamumuno ni Dr. Bernie Miguel sa pakikipagtulungan ng Department of Education, Kidapawan City Division, Provincial Government of Cotabato at ng Notre Dame Broadcasting Corporation. Ang Radyo ESKWELA. Sa kinakaharap na krisis ng ating bansa, ang pag-aaral at pagtututo ay hindi dapat mahinto. Edukasyon, ating isulong. Ito ang DepEd Radyo Eskwela. Radyo Eskwela, Lunes hanggang Biyernes. Ganap na alas 10 hanggang alas 11 ng umaga at alas 3 hanggang alas 4 ng hapon. Radyo Eskwela sa DXND, Radyo Bida.
Radyo Eskwela.
Hi, Grade 6 Science learners. Based on updates on outputs, you did a great job in your previous lessons. Today, we are going to discuss the interactions among living things and non-living things in tropical rainforest, coral reefs, and mangrove swamps. This time, I would like you to get your module in Science 6, Quarter 2, Week 5, which is all about the interaction among living and non-living things. Our objective is to discuss the interaction among living things and non-living things in tropical rainforest, coral reefs, and mangrove swamps. Please listen attentively to your radio teacher.
Hi kids, this is your radio teacher, Teacher Stephen Pahang from Kidapawan City Division at your service. Before starting our new topic, let us recall first your previous lesson. On page 10 of your module, on the What's In part, identify the partnership of an ecosystem: commensalism, mutualism, parasitism, competition, or predation. Fill in the table with appropriate answers. Write your answers on your activity sheet. Number 1. Birds live in the hollow trees. Number 2. Frog hunting mosquito. Number 3. Fleas or ticks that live on dogs and cats. Number 4. Goats and cow dwelling in the same place. Number 5. Plant pollinators and plants.
Hello there once again. Have you thought of planning for a walk in a forest? I am sure that you will enjoy the whispers of the cold air. How about swimming in the beach? It is relaxing to look up at the blue sky and feel the warm sand between your toes. Or exploring mangrove swamp barefooted at low tide. Just be careful of the shells that hide in the mud. But before going on a planned trip, I want you first to familiarize yourself with scenes that you will see when you get there. With me as your companion, I am certain that your experience will be an extraordinary one. So what are you waiting for? Let's start now. Let's get started with our first activity on module. Try to look at the What's New part of your module. This time, let's proceed to our topic for today. We are going to discuss the interaction among living things and non-living things in tropical rainforest, coral reefs, and mangrove swamps.
Let's start with activity number 1. It doesn't matter. What will you do? Number 1. Study the pictures of ecosystem below. Number 2. Identify the different things found in each ecosystem. Number 3. Fill in table 1 with the needed data. Write your answer on a separate sheet of paper. Number 4. Make a triple chart. Write separately the names of the animals under each group. Number 5. Copy the triple chart and write your answer on a separate sheet of paper. Now let's try to answer the questions. Number 1. How will you define an ecosystem? Number 2. What are the things found in an ecosystem? Number 3. What are the components of a tropical rainforest, coral reef, and mangrove swamp? Wow, you're all amazing. I am very sure you have done it correctly. Now let's continue. Activity number 2, virtual tour. 1. Study the pictures between interactions of living and non-living things below. 2. Take note the non-living things that are found in the ecosystem. 3. Discuss the beneficial and harmful interactions among living things and non-living things affect the tropical rainforest. Number 4. Make a graphic organizer or a brainstorming web on the harmful and beneficial interactions among living and non-living things and their effects in the tropical rainforest. Number 5. Fill in the appropriate spaces in the brainstorming web with your response. Now let's try to answer the following questions. 1. What is the picture all about? 2. Are there enough plants and animals? Why do you think so? 3. What have you observed with the water and soil in the forest? 4. Is it your ideal forest? Why? Let's go for another activity, kids. Activity 3, good and bad. Read and follow properly the given instructions. 1. Read and analyze carefully each of the items asked in each column in the table. 2. Discuss the beneficial and harmful interactions between the living and non-living things. 3. Provide an accurate answer to what is asked for. 4. Write your responses in the appropriate spaces in the table provided. Use a separate sheet of paper for this table. Now let's try to answer the guide questions. Write your answer on a separate sheet of paper. 1. What are the non-living things that interact with the living things in coral reefs? 2. What are the beneficial interactions between the living things and non-living things in coral reefs? State their effects to the coral reefs. Number 3. What are the harmful interactions between the living things and non-living things? State their effects to the coral reefs. Number 4. How will you conserve coral reefs? Wow, you're really interested with our topic, guys. But here is another activity that could add knowledge in line with our topic today. So for further understanding, let's have the next activity. Activity 4, No One is an Island. For our instructions, 1. Read and analyze carefully each of the items asked in each column in the table. 2. Provide an accurate answer to what is asked for. 3. Write your responses in the appropriate spaces in the table provided. Use a separate sheet of paper for your answer. Question number 1. What are the non-living things that interact with the living things in mangrove swamp? 2. What are the beneficial interactions between the living things and non-living things in the mangrove swamp? State their effects to the mangrove swamp. 3. What are the harmful interactions between the living things and non-living things? State their effects to the mangrove swamp. And number 4, how will you conserve a mangrove swamp? Wow! Kids, you have a wonderful 4 activities exploring what's new part of your module. You have done a great job. Let's go further in this lesson. An ecosystem is any place where organisms interact with other living organisms and non-living components. An ecosystem has 2 components, the living and the non-living components. The living components of an ecosystem are called biotic factors. These are the plants and animals. The non-living components are called abiotic factors. The examples are air, sunlight, water, soil, and temperature. The tropical rainforests contain a wide variety of evergreen plants due to the high rainfall and high temperatures. These can be found in the areas near the equator. Rainforest is an ecosystem formed by the interactions among the living and non-living things for survival. It includes biotic and abiotic components known as the living and non-living things. The interactions are either beneficial to the rainforest to maintain its ecological balance. It is important to protect and conserve them. The coral reef plays an important role among the marine organisms. It is dominated by the corals and serves as the feeding and breeding station of the sea creatures such as the sponges, crustaceans, mollusks, fish, sea turtles, sharks, dolphins, and much more. The abundance of phytoplankton, algae, and seagrasses make it as the favorite place for nourishing the young sea creatures. Because of this, the coral reef is considered the restaurant of the sea. Other non-living factors that help the coral reef exist are the water, air, and nutrients. The living things continuously interact with these non-living things to maintain the ecological balance in the coral reefs. This is a habitat of various animals and plants, needing the temperature appropriate for their body to survive. The animals and plants interact with each other depends on their needs to survive. Example, plants are getting their minerals from the soil and making food using sunlight. Sea creatures needing the salt water or fresh water. Shellfish attach themselves to the roots. Birds settle their nests on the mangrove trees. Mangrove swamps is a great help to people, animals, and plants. It serves as protector, food, and income resources. Most mangrove swamps are destroyed for social development. There you go, kids. We are now on the What's More part of your module on page 18. Let's answer activity number 5 in other words. Directions: 1. Study the concept map. 2. Fill in the boxes with the terms you have learned about tropical rainforests, coral reefs, and mangrove swamps. 3. Write your answers on the box. Use separate sheet of paper for your answer. Part 2. On the What's More, activity number 6, complete the square. Directions: make a 4-square map graphic organizer of the beneficial and harmful interactions among living things and non-living things and their effects on the tropical rainforest. For our guide questions, write your answers on a separate sheet of paper. 1. What particular interaction between living things in tropical rainforests and non-living things is presented? Number 2. What are the beneficial and harmful interactions among living things and non-living things in the tropical rainforests? And number 3. State the effects of each interaction. Let's continue. Activity number 7, good and bad. Read and follow properly the given instructions. 1. Read and analyze carefully each of the items asked in each column in the table. 2. Write check if the interactions given are beneficial, and X if it shows harmful interactions among living things and non-living things. Number 3. Provide an accurate answer to what is asked for. 4. Write your responses in the appropriate spaces in the table provided. And for activity number 8, tell me the truth. Draw a heart on the blank if the statement tells the truth and lightning bolt if not. Number 1. Mangrove swamps are wetlands that can be found on coastal areas. 2. Living and non-living things found in mangrove swamps are shrimps, birds, shells, and mangrove trees. 3. Mangrove swamps bring harmful effects to people. That is why these places are being destroyed. 4. Mangrove swamps are in danger because of coastal development such as port facilities, widening of roads, and some are developed into shrimp farms, salt farms, and alike. 5. Mangrove swamp is of great help to people, not only for source of food, but this provides also raw materials where they used to earn a living or getting income. 6. Mangrove swamp also protects shorelines from winds, big waves, and erosion. 7. There are sea creatures needing the salt water or fresh water, and shellfish attach themselves to the roots. 8. Mangrove swamps were protected even there is presence of oil spill and too much pollution both on land and on water. We are now on what I have learned part of your module. Activity A. Fill in the graphic organizer with the needed data. While in Activity B, check the corresponding column if the effect in the first column is brought by beneficial or harmful interactions. And finally, on Activity C, fill in with the correct answer the boxes in the table. Now let's proceed in what I can do. Read the following situations, answer them briefly, and write your answer on a separate sheet of paper. A. An aquarium is an example of an artificial ecosystem. You're going to make an aquarium in your house. What materials will you prepare? B. Is a flower pot an ecosystem? Why? C. You are living in a forest. Your father is practicing kaingin system. What are the harmful effects of this method to our tropical rainforest? D. You're living near a mangrove swamp area. You observe that there are people cutting the mangrove trees which they use as fence. How can you help in preserving the mangrove swamp? And letter E. Your father is a fisherman. Being the eldest, you accompany your father to go fishing. Your father wants to have a big catch, so he uses cyanide. How will you convince your father to stop using this method? Now that we are done with our lesson, we will have to evaluate your understanding. Kids, I guess you're now equipped after your thorough discussion with me, your radio teacher. Are you ready for your assessment today? Let's try to answer the following questions. 1. Which of the following is one of the most biologically diverse ecosystem on Earth? A. Coral reefs. B. Deserts. C. Mangrove swamps. Or letter D. Tropical rainforest. That's right. The correct answer is letter D. Question number 2. Which of the following is not a characteristic of tropical rainforest? A. Dense with evergreen plants. B. Diverse species of animals and plants. C. Found in polar regions. Or letter D. High rainfall and high temperature. Very good. The correct answer is letter C. Number 3. What are coral reefs made of? A. Coral polyps. B. Seagrass. C. Planktons. Or letter D. Tentacles. Excellent. The correct answer is letter A. Question number 4. Which of the following activities causes destruction of the coral reef ecosystem? A. Global warming. B. Pollution. C. Overfishing. Or letter D. All of the above. That's right. The correct answer is letter D. And finally, question number 5. Which of the following activities could cause damage to mangrove swamps? A. Dynamite fishing. B. Illegal logging. C. Pollution, or letter D. Erosion? You are right. The correct answer is letter C. Well, I am very much happy about what we've learned today. I hope, kids, that you also enjoy our lesson today about interactions among living and non-living things. Until next time, I am your radio teacher, Teacher Stephen Pahang from DepEd Kidapawan City Division for the School on the Air for Grade 6 Science. Giving you the lesson written by Ma'am Flora May B. Pancho from DepEd Kidapawan City Division.
Like a small boat on the ocean, sending big waves into motion. Like how a single word can make a heart open. I might only have one match, but I can make an explosion.
You have heard your science teacher, Teacher Stephen Pahang from Kidapawan City. He is really very good teacher, right? We have learned the interaction among living things and non-living things in tropical rainforest, coral reefs, and mangrove swamps. It was really wonderful experience doing all those activities we did today, isn't it? Thank you, Teacher Stephen Pahang and Teacher Flora May B. Pancho, our script writer. This is Gladys Mir Pontongan, your host of the day. Always remember to study, have fun, and enjoy our lesson. Thank you so much and God bless us all.
No, I've still got a lot of fire left in me.
Radyo ESKWELA.
Alright, alhamdulillah. Congratulations og nato nang nahuman nga ipasundayag ang atong grade 5 o grade 6 science quarter 2 week 5.
Ayan.
And of course, congratulations to Sir Stephen Pahang.
Yay!
And
As
of
always,
course, Ma'am Gladys Mir Pontongan. And also to Science Coordinator Ma'am Lourdes Kahulugan po para sa suporta no sa ato ang science na radio based instruction.
kuan di ay ring no, bago lang nato na browse no sa atong Facebook. It's a celebration day karon og International
Thank
Women's
you,
Day.
thank
So
you.
I would like to greet both of you a happy International Women's Day. So women
Okay.
power ta karon.
Yes, girl power.
Of course, I also would like to extend my greetings sa ako ang wife, no. Happy Women's Day. So unya mag-celebrate ta unya. Okay.
I-prove yun ang Women's Day,
Oo,
ana.
okay. Mao gid na inyong adlaw. Although every day can be a Women's Day, pero karon special gyud siya no kay
correct.
gi-recognize siya karong adlaw.
Ito,
Pwede
daghan
naman
ito
to
lang.
Women's
Actually,
Day.
the whole month
of
of
March.
March.
Kauban dahil sa Fire Prevention Month, no?
Yes.
But today is the Women's International
special
Day.
jud.
Ayan. So sa tanan nga mga teachers, nga mga magtutudo na ito, mga ginikanan, no? Mga kababayinan. Ayan
Tanang mga
po.
mama, kay women man gina sila.
Sa mga kababayinan right now, no?
Correct.
Sulong po. Sulong lang po
Sulong
tayo. Sulong lang po tayo dahil tayo po ay isa sa
Importante.
mga ano ba tawag dyan? Strong na
Yes.
branch no sa kakahoy. Kung wala na, maglisod yun na.
Pero actually lahi na gyud ang women karon no sa pagtatar in terms of sa status nato sa community compared sa uban. So murag dako na gyud ang agi nga ang pakigbisog sa una inyo nang natagamtaman karon kay aduna na gyud equal rights especially sa
Yes.
gender and sensitivity.
Correct.
Ginatahod na ginatagan og igong respeto. So
Correct.
congratulations
Yes
mga
po.
babae.
Kasi nga no, ang part ng ating tradition is yung babae pambahay lang
Oo,
po.
the
no?
second class
Ibilin lang
citizen.
yun na. Oh, ibilin lang yun na, pangbalay ra yun na. Di ka pwede nga ng panglalaki nga trabaho kasi nga pambabae lang
Ang
yun.
babae,
Karol.
housewife lang yun.
Pero
But
Karol,
now,
nahimo ng
women
presidente.
are being
No?
empowered
Correct.
na.
In the
Empowered
Philippines,
na ta.
duha na kababae ang nahimong
Correct.
presidente. So
Oo.
kana pa lang kuan na siya, proof na siya nga equal na gyud ang atong rights.
Kaya, kaya yung sinasabi, kung kaya nyo, kaya rin po namin.
Okay.
Gusto
Sige.
nyo ka ha.
Kung
So,
kaya ni Juan, kaya rin
Kaya ni Juana.
correct. Ayan. Congratulations to all women out there. The
Sige.
Happy
Sige.
International Day.
Okay.
And daghan kayong salamat sa padayon nga pag-monitor, pagsuporta sa atong Radyo Eskwela. And may hapon sa tanan nga mga Facebook livers, ayan, sa mga nakatutok until now. Maayong hapon, no, daghan kayong salamat mga ginikanan, mga learners, ug mga adlaw atangan ang English sa morning and Filipino in the afternoon para po sa ating Radyo Eskwela.
Correct.
And sa tanan, no, even sa mga magtutudlo nga nagapadayon gihapon sa mga buluhaton, no, go, go, go. Daghan kayong
Yes.
salamat sa padayon nga pag-monitor sa atong Radyo Eskwela. Kanunay itong kauban ng suporta sa atong RBI Coordinator, Ma'am Shirley Dua, LR Supervisor, Ma'am Hazel Aparesa. Daghang salamat, may hapon. Kini si Crizaldean Sampani Binyas.
Maayong hapon ug daghang salamat sa ato ang mga learners this afternoon sa ato ang science team nga gipangunahan ni Ma'am Lourdes Kahulugan, kay Sir Steven Pahang ug sa tanan nga mga writers, script writers, radio hosts and teachers. Congratulations sa inyo ang tanan. Daghang salamat usab sa ato ang sponsor with Love Jan Foundation Incorporated headed by Dr. Bernie Miguel o kay Sir Ian Leo Domingo. Daghang kayong salamat kini si Gladys Mir Pontongan.
Sana all nang hipos na og laptop o gibutang na sa dako nga bag. Salamat Notre Dame Broadcasting Corporation ang duha ka madagkong istasyon sa Soc-Sargen ug Barm Region, DXMS Radyo Bida Cotabato City, DXNT Radyo Bida Kidapawan City. Sa ngalan na lamang sa With Love John Foundation Incorporated headed by Dr. Bernie Miguel ug Department of Education Kidapawan City Division, mao kana ang paghatod kaninyo sa Radyo Eskwela. Ako si Marlon Bulasa nga nagaingon sa taliwala nining pandemya kitang tanan, we should be a fighter, not a quitter.
Inyong napakinggan ang Radyo Eskwela, programang inihatid ng With Love John Foundation Incorporated sa ilalim ng pamumuno ni Dr. Bernie Miguel sa pakikipagtulungan ng Department of Education, Kidapawan City Division, Provincial Government of Cotabato at ng Notre Dame Broadcasting Corporation. Radyo Eskwela, hanggang sa susunod na pagsasahing papawid. Maraming salamat.
Radyo Bida. Radyo Bida. Dito, bida ka.